Hello everyone and welcome back. For most people, hiking in the woods is a pleasant and a relaxing experience. But sometimes it's not. What would you do if you knew that someone is watching you? Or worse, trying to kill you? So grab your flashlight and follow me into the dark forest. Some weird shit has happened to me. I was a pretty well-behaved kid, and I came from a relatively normal home. I grew up in the backwoods of Rhode Island, and it was altogether a normal, boring place to be. Most of the time, anyway. There were a few instances that I can't quite explain, and I thought I'd share some with you, one at a time, so they don't drag out. Instance 1. My childhood best friend, we'll call him Frank, and I had pretty active imaginations, so whenever we hang out, we'd play pretend for a few hours at least. Usually, we were led to adventuring, pretending to be veteran explorers or the heroes of some magical quest. Most of the time we spent doing this was normal. We'd sometimes get kicked out of my neighbor's yard for digging holes to bang her down, or have to run from the St. Bernard that lived down the street. But it was typically smooth sailing. This particular story takes place on a cold spring day when Frank and I were about 13 years old. By that age, we had gotten past the play pretend and mostly just liked to hike and see what was around. Frank and I had a whole Saturday to ourselves, and since we had explored the 8 acres of woods near my house almost entirely, we decided to venture out near his place. We made ourselves some lunch, bundled up for the cold day, and made our way outside. Frank lived next to a medium-sized farm plot, and there was normally something growing in the field. Sometimes it was wheat, sometimes corn. But that year, the farmer had decided to hold off. We thought it was the perfect chance to cut through to the woods on the far side of the property without making much of a fuss. We made our way across the empty field and hiked through the woods for about 2 hours. I was about to suggest that we turn around, when Frank said that he saw something strange, pointing to a tall dark figure about 50 feet away. It was as if the sun was setting and the trees were casting long shadows, but it was barely noon, and the figure had a defined shape. I have no idea what took over Frank and I, but we booked it out of those woods as fast as I've ever run. I remember running so fast and cutting up my legs, but that was really the least of my worries. We were pretty deep into the woods, and the run was long and tiring. Every few steps, I would turn back and see the same black figure, moving silently and maintaining the distance between us and it. By the time Frank and I broke the tree line, I was exhausted and sufficiently terrified. At that point, I lost my footing in the mud of the field, and I fell face first into the muck, convinced that I was about to die or get maimed by a bear. At that point, I wasn't really sure of what was chasing us. I yelled for Frank to help me up. When Frank turned around, his panic immediately subsided. Whatever had been chasing us had stopped right at the tree line, and it seemed to hang motionless in space between the rock wall that defined the property of the farm. I don't know what it was, and I don't think I ever will. It had no features and made no noise. It was just a black mass with a tangible presence. After that momentary silence between the three of us, Frank held me back to my feet, and we continued to race back to his place. I did not think my legs could carry me the half-mile back to his house, but they did. Man, Was his dad pissed to see us, come back covered in cuts? We still talk about this from time to time, and neither he nor I really figured out what went down that day. We never went back into the woods across the field, for good reason, and nothing weird ever happened when we went into other woods near his place. I've told the story to a few of my close friends, and nobody else has been able to come up with a logical explanation. So I leave it up to something that Frank and I just happened to cross by that spring. No more, no less. I was raised on the outskirts of a large city. The place used to be an old coal mining village with lots of old farms and building to explore. It became quite urbanized in the 60s, but we still found cool places to explore. Nothing out of the ordinary. Abandoned buildings, farmhouses, factories. We used to love exploring these old places. They were like pieces of history, just preserved and left to decay. At some point in history, someone was here doing something, and that fascinated us. We used to find a lot of old books, records and stuff, and be fascinated by them. We were always very careful not to destroy and vandalize, but as kids, I guess we were quite reckless. We never really understood the dangers back then, or cared. One time, we were exploring deep in a wooded area, but we stumbled upon a large double metal door built into the side, a mound of dirt and grass. The mound looked naturally placed and the door was partially covered by growth. It was quite hard to spot as we were so deep in the woods, and it was quite rare for people to come out this far. We could see the door was partially open and pitch black inside. From what we could see, we agreed to come back early the next day with some torches and stuff to explore. We had heard rumors that there was a closed-up mine around, but we had no idea what an old coal mine would even look like in the first place, so we assumed it might just be an old electricity servicing station or something. Sounds fun. Let's do it, we thought. We arrived early the next day for maximum daylight, and as we approached, we noticed the door was not partially open anymore, but completely closed. Odd, we thought. The wind might have pushed it closed, but we are in the middle of the woods, and these doors were massive, and as I said, had growth. They didn't move so easily. When I think back now, we never gave much thought to it. So, ahead we went. We pulled the door back, and it moved so slowly and made quite a scratching noise as it rubbed against the concrete on the ground. We took a peek inside to the pitch darkness, and we decided that someone should wait outside as we were concerned about getting lost or trapped. We switched on our torches and started on our way inside. We were walking down a slight slope. We were walking down, and we continued walking down for about 10 minutes. We could not see the door anymore due to the slope and height of the roof. When we reached the bottom, we saw in the distance the place went on, but to our right was a small building-like structure. We went inside to explore first and agreed we would only go this far for now and to return back later. What we saw in the office at the time seemed like nothing to us, but thinking back now, I can see, perhaps, there was something more sinister to it. The office building had 3 rooms. One was a small bathroom with a toilet and a tiled area that looked like a shower area, and the main office had 2 old desks, shelves, and a bed. The third room was a small pantry area. What seems strange about this now is that on the shelves and desk were toys. We noticed that they were not that old, maybe only a few years old, What the hell are they doing down here? One of us even joked about taking them, as they were not that beat up. When we opened the drawers of the desk, they had Polaroid photos. As we looked through them, we noticed that they were of the room we were in, and in some photos showed pictures of the toys. In one photo, there was a shadowy figure standing in the doorway, holding what appeared to be a rope. We started to freak out a bit, but continued to explore the room a little bit more. What we found next made us make a beeline for it. We opened one of the filing cabinets and found lots of pairs of kids' shoes. They were sky blue with red stripes. We heard a small bang nearby at this point, and we agreed, let's get the fuck out of here. We made a beeline for the entrance, and we were relieved to get to the exit with our friend standing outside. He looked a bit confused when he saw us come out, just the two of us. He said, "Did you get caught?" We asked, "What do you mean?" He said he saw a guy come in, and he thought he was security. The bang we heard must have been him inside. We ran out of the woods and home, in case we got caught, but thinking back to this, who was this guy? Was he doing something sinister inside? I am not sure, but some years later, there was an arrest when a dog walker spotted a man leaving the mine with a small boy who was crying, and he shouted at him, and the man fled and was later caught. It makes me shiver. What could have happened to us down there, and how as naive children we never understood what we saw fully. Who knows what would have happened if we got caught down there. At the time, I was a 20-year-old female, and I had just moved alone to a small town in upstate New York. I had grown up in another slightly larger town, about 60 miles away, and just wanted a new start. I love camping, often go camping in the Adirondacks, but at that time, I hadn't yet made friends to go camping with, so I wasn't going to go into the real woods alone. Down the road from me, I had been walking and found an area where the power lines cut through a wooded section. The power lines were perpendicular to the road. It was near a house, but far enough to the right of the house where I thought people wouldn't mind if I walked up the trail that the power lines make. Not sure about other countries, but in the US, they keep power lines clear in case maintenance is necessary. So, I wander up there, noticing how it's actually pretty deep woods, and I can get far enough from the house that I saw on the road that they could not possibly think I am trying to break in or anything. I could go camping up here. It's secluded enough to give the real woods experience, but close enough to the road that I would not be in real danger of wildlife or anything. Okay, sweet. So I do. I set up camping this little clearing that I accessed by climbing the hills, following the power lines, then turned left onto what seemed to be a deer trail. Deer are everywhere in New York. Then I came upon this really nice flat grassy clearing. I built my fire off to the side after making sure to clear the dead wood. I'm feeling really smart and independent. I was creepy to sleep in the woods alone, as I had always had at least one camping companion. But whatever. Next day, I decided to wander further down the path to see where it leads. I walk for about a half hour, and I can see some fields on the right, and there is a fence between the fields and the path. So again, I figure people can't be mad at me being here. Then I come across another path heading to the right. I follow it. A couple of feet in, It curves slightly, and there is an old van on the left of the path. Well, that's strange, but it's about 1 p.m, near noon anyway. Broad daylight, so I feel no danger. I go up to the van, which had obviously been there a very long time. It was 70s style, made me think of Scooby-Doo van, and way overgrown with weeds. There are streaks of brownish red going down the side. From the bottom of the doors, I look in and see what appears to be old bedding in the back. But it was all shredded. The curtains in the windows were shredded, and the clothing looked like it was from the 70s or early 80s. I still felt no danger, snickening at the terrible fashions back in the day. I continue along the path for a short time, until I finish rounding the slight bend. I stop dead in my tracks. Finally, my reptile sense, or whatever you want to call it, wakes the hell up and starts screaming at me full volume. Up ahead, there is a creepy-ass doll hanging from the trees, but its neck, with a rope, not just stuck in the trees. Just to the left of that, there is an old garage, overgrowth with weeds. To the right of it, though, there is a huge cage-like structure, easily big enough to hold a full-size man. It seems to be made up of pipes and other long metal objects, just kind of welded together. Some were up and down, some were across, and the squares they made weren't big enough to fit my head through, not that I tried. It had 4 sides and a ceiling. It had other creepy-ass doors hanging from it. It also had reddish-brown stains running down the sides, just like the van. Further behind it, there is a run-down house, creeped out as hell. I am not a runner, I am a chunky girl. I had smoked for 6 years at that point, and I do not run, but I ran that day. I don't even remember the run. I just ripping it out of the ground. I just remember coming up my campsite, grabbing my tent in the swoop as I ran past, ripping it out of the ground. As I continued running, I left my cooler, my food behind. Never went back for it either. I dropped the tent stake somewhere along the way, and I had to repair rips in my tent. I tore down the hill. I'm still surprised I didn't break my neck. Jumped in my car and sped home. I locked all my doors, then paced my house going, "What the fuck?" for hours. It's been 11 years since that incident, and even typing it now makes my hands shake. I know I now live almost 1,400 miles away, but I still just made sure my doors were locked. They are. Crazy thing is, it wasn't in deep woods. Maybe in the 70s. It was though. Who knows? There are people living within a short walk of this place. And no, I know you're going to ask. No, I did not call the cops. I can't really articulate why. My best analysis, looking back, I didn't want that creep to come find me. I should have. Yes, you are right. I am hoping that it was just an old crime scene, not some sick fuck who still keeps people in cages in the woods. Hello, I'm Miko, a 28-year-old male from a small town in the Lapland. Well, I'm not originally from here, but because I do documentaries about the paranormal, I've moved here because I think I found one of the most interesting cases so far. I decided to left a note in the newspaper because there isn't really internet here, so I just wrote looking for people to tell me about the creature in the forest. Maybe a week has gone by until my doorbell rang. I thought to myself that it's pretty weird because I don't know anybody here. I went to the door to open it, and there was maybe a 70-year-old dude behind the door, and boy, he looked like a real creep. You know, one of those people who just don't want to meet because you are 90% sure you'll get mugged. Something was interesting about him though, and I was going nowhere on my investigation, so I decided to let him in. The man walks in without saying a word, puts his hat on the rack and puts his cane leaning to the wall and just goes into my kitchen. He yelled to me, "Make me some coffee, boy. I don't have all day here." I went into the kitchen and started making coffee and trying to chat with him, but he didn't really respond at all. After I poured him a cup, he took a long sip out of it and finally let some words out of his mouth. "You know, boy, that you shouldn't be looking into this. It will come after you and no one will ever find you." I got unsettled for a moment and told him that I don't really believe in these things, which was obviously a lie because I know they are out there. He told me fine and went on. "The thing you are looking for has been long before us here. The first I've heard about this beast is from my grandfather. In the 1100s, there was an abusive father who liked to beat his children and wife real bad. One night, the situation got really bad, and Esko and Adelena decided they will just run until they can't hear their father's voice anymore. They took off to the night. It was dark outside, and you could not see a thing. But they were familiar with the woods, so they just went in to the deeply danced wood. When their father realized the situation, he took off barefoot behind them yelling, 'I'll get you little rats, and it won't be pretty this time.' Asko and Adelena kept on running until they heard a loud thump voice behind them, and it was dead silence after that. They looked in front of them. A tall dark figure was in front of them, and suddenly the forest did not hold any sounds. At morning time, the abusive father woke up covered in blood. That's when he realized he was struck from behind and left dead in the snow. For his luck, it wasn't a very cold night, and he made it to the morning. He started following the footprints in front of him and reached a dead end, leaving him and all the villagers baffled. That's all I know, boy. But for one of those delicious-looking cinnamon buns, I might have something else I can share." Without a second doubt, I took one of them and gave it to him. He went on with his story. He told me that it's almost certain that this creature to these days lives in the forest and no one knows if he harms the children. He also told me that the last time someone tried to investigate this is long gone and it's like he vanished. It's been told that the beast captured him, but in my personal opinion, he just gave up and left. The old man went on with sipping his coffee and eating the bun. "Tell you the truth, I know more, but you seem like a good kid and I don't want anything bad happening to you. So just take your stuff and leave. That's the best for you." I thought to myself that this old guy has something to do with all this and I should follow him. So I just told him that I will consider this and that I would stay here in their beautiful city for a few more days. I escorted him to the door, told him my thanks and to have a good day. I went straight to my window, which viewed to the street outside, and I saw him going into the car, and from his lips I could almost read that he said thanks for waiting me, and thus the moment he went into the passenger seat, I could not see in the car because the windows were tinted. But it got me hooked to find out more. I took my coat and ran to my car and tried to reach them, but they were nowhere to be found anymore. I still can't believe it. It happened just last night, but it feels like a different lifetime. I was with a few of my fraternity brothers out in campus woods, a section of trails in the woods, right outside our campus, when we heard it. It was a night very similar to the other nights we spent out in the woods, but something was off. The wind was howling just enough to make the trees groan and creak. The sound of rustling leaves moving and dancing about. It was pitch black, save for when the full moon picked his face around the ominous grey clouds. We were playing manhunt, a glorified game of hide-and-seek in the woods, when it happened. I had picked a hiding spot behind some falling down trees, just out of sight from the main trail, when I alerted the hunters to come find us via text message. I could hear the two hunters getting closer and closer to my position, and I could see the light of their flashlight growing even closer. Finally, I could see them off in the distance, heading my way, and just like that, the entire woods stood still. The wind stopped, the trees grew silent, and the leaves paused their dance. The air grew thick, as if their timber was holding its breath. The silence was deafening. The hunter's footsteps and words were magnified in the immense silence, and they were headed straight for me, about 50 feet away. When I hear, clear as day, I think they passed us. The two hunters immediately turned around in surprise and aimed their flashlight into the empty timber in front of them. "Hello?" the first one calls. "We heard you," calls the second. I assumed at the time that they were either messing with me or were talking to themselves. After all, the voice seemed to be closer to me than they were. My only question was, why did they turn the opposite way? After a few seconds of scanning the timber behind them, they seemed to get rather spooked and headed back down the trail, looking for whatever they heard. I jumped out of my hiding spot and followed them quietly, wondering what they were doing. I mean, they had not found me yet and were already leaving. I caught up to them, giving them quite a spook, one that was more than I would expect from them, just seeing me. I asked them what they were doing, and they told me they were looking for me, because they thought they heard me speak. "What do you mean?" I asked them. "Why would I speak to them while I'm hiding and give away my position?" They told me that they heard in my voice, "I think they passed us." At this point, I was pretty spooked, and it must have been visible in my face, because they immediately went pale, and nearby whispering said, "That wasn't you?" They swear to me that it was my voice, but I heard it too, clear as day. I asked them, hoping that they were messing with me, and that this is a joke, but I can barely get them to speak at all. We all decided that it was best to get the hell out of Dodge, and that whatever spoke to us was probably still out there. As we were heading back, I swear, I kept hearing footsteps behind us, but every time I shined my flashlight, it was just more trees. We were passing through the clearing towards the start of the trail, when one of my friends froze in place and said, "What the hell is that?" He pointed off into the opposite side of the clearing, and I thought I could make out an impossibly tall silhouette between the trees. I quickly looked at my friend to make sure I wasn't looking at where he was pointing, but when I looked back, it was gone. That was enough to make me hurry back home. Whatever it was, it wanted us to know it was there, and it spooked the hell out of us. I am not sure if that is good or bad, but I am going to take a few more buddies and we are going to find out what this thing is for good. I've done some research since writing this, and the closest thing to our experience would be some Native American legends like the Wendigo and Skinwalker. The stories behind them scared the shit out of me and my buddies, but we are still determined to find out what it is. Hey there, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you liked this video. If so, leave a comment and a like. I will upload my next video on Sunday, and it is going to be a special one. Can you guess? Leave me a comment below. Take care, and I will see you all in my next video.